I want to welcome everyone to our last session in this series on emotions for us guys. Thank you all for all of your support and for joining in on these videos over the past 10 weeks. I hope that you've heard something that you have been able to take and to implement into your life. We have one more topic today, and as usual, I'm excited. Today, we're going to look at some ways that we can apply what we know about emotions and what we've learned about emotions. Today, we're going to talk about the skills of emotional intelligence. So let's get into it. Working to build emotional intelligence can benefit us in every area of our lives. Just like we work to build physical strength or leadership acumen for different health and building our careers, building emotional intelligence can help us in relationships in all sorts of different areas. A belligerent samurai, an old Japanese tale goes, once challenged a Zen master to explain the concept of heaven and hell. But the monk replied with scorn, "You're nothing but a lout. I can't waste my time with the likes of you." His very honor attacked. The samurai flew into a rage and, pulling his sword from its scabbard, yelled, "I could kill you for your impertinence." "That," the monk calmly replied, "is hell." Startled at seeing the truth in what the master pointed out about the fury that had him in its grip, the samurai calmed down, sheathed his sword, and bowed, thanking the monk for the insight. "And that," said the monk, "is heaven." This story illustrates the crucial difference between being caught up in a feeling and by becoming aware that you are being swept away by it. Last week, we talked a little bit about emotional awareness, and we mentioned emotional intelligence a little bit, but this week we're going to actually dive into and look more at what actually is emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence was introduced as a concept in the late 1990s. Daniel Goleman, the psychologist whose story we just read, says that emotional intelligence are abilities such as being able to motivate oneself and persist in the face of frustrations, to control impulse and delay gratification, to regulate one's mood and to keep distress from swamping the ability to think, and to empathize and to hope. Another psychologist, Archibald Hart, claims that emotional intelligence can be applied directly to us as men as our ability to recognize and accept our emotions while also continuing to maintain a masculine identity. Emotional intelligence is generally said to include a few different skills. Mainly, it includes emotional awareness, which, as we discussed last week, is the ability to identify and to name our own emotions. Emotional intelligence is said to include the ability to harness those emotions and to apply them to tasks like thinking and problem solving. It's actually applying that awareness to particular issues and particular situations. And it's also the ability to manage emotions, which includes both regulating our emotions when necessary and helping others to do the same. There's an additional 4 competencies. There's 4 other things in this discussion of emotional intelligence that deal with actions or awareness and deal with things that are inside of ourselves or things that are directed towards others. These 4 core competencies are self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and relationship management. Now, you may be thinking, that's a lot of things that we're supposed to be able to do. What if I've never heard of such a thing? And what if I have no clue how to do any of that or what any of this is that you're talking about? Well, there are a few things that we can do to build some of these abilities in emotional intelligence. Today, I have 3 things that I want to share with you that you can do to practice being more emotionally intelligent. None of these things are magic bullets. They are more like disciplines that, by practicing them over and over, will help you to grow as an emotional and compassionate individual. It's kind of like shooting a free throw or working on footwork or shooting that bow and arrow time and time again, rep after rep, starting out really slow at first and figuring out the mechanics of it, and then picking it up and becoming more and more proficient and more confident the more that you work on it. The more that we practice these things, the more benefit they're going to be, and the more we're going to be able to do the things we're practicing. The first way that you can build more emotional intelligence that I want to share with you today is to just be aware. Being aware is what we discussed last week in the video, and just implementing all of that. It's all of those items that have to deal with emotional awareness. And if you haven't yet, I suggest going back and watching that video and seeing some of the things that we talked about in that lesson. But to recap, the 3 ways that we are emotionally aware are to notice the feeling that we're feeling, notice the emotion, name that emotion, put a name with it, and then to express it or get it outside of ourselves. The second way that we can build better emotional intelligence is to work on our communication. One of the core competencies of emotional intelligence is being able to manage relationships effectively. This includes building new relationships as well as maintaining and growing relationships that we already have, maintaining and growing existing relationships. One part of communicating better is to practice active listening. Active listening is not being distracted and actually engaging in conversation with the person that we are conversing with. Actually listening to what the individual is saying instead of thinking ahead to what you're going to respond with, and actually trying to understand what they're saying. One statement that I have picked up over the past few years is, and that has become a personal motto of mine, is to seek first to understand. When you listen actively, you are actually trying to tune in to the person that is speaking, to what they're saying, to their body language, and engaging and making them feel heard and understood, because you really actually are trying and working to understand them. We also communicate better when we work on our empathy. Empathy and communication goes hand in hand with active listening. Conversating with other humans can be incredibly awkward, and it can have some really tense moments at times, or at least for me, they can. When you attempt to be empathic with someone, you are essentially trying to understand them and not just attempting to explain away their feelings or to fix their problems. You are there just to be there with them. Empathy is sitting in silence with someone who has just experienced a loss, and it is also becoming exuberant and celebrating a massive win with somebody. Both of these, of active listening and empathy, both are skills that help us to communicate better with all of the people that are around us. Our spouses, our bosses, our employees, fellow volunteers that we work or serve with at church, everyone that's around us. And that skill of communication actually leads us to being more emotionally intelligent. The third way that we build emotional intelligence and that we can build more emotional intelligence is to practice the technique of down regulation. Down regulation is bringing the intensity of the anger or the anxiety or whatever emotion that we are feeling down a step or two. Bringing this intensity down allows us to think more clearly and to respond in positive ways. Being emotionally aware is a big part of our ability to down regulate. As we notice our emotions and as we name them, then we can get outside of them and make a more informed decisions on how we will respond. As we think about the samurai from our story at the beginning of the lesson. This concept of being able to down regulate opens the opportunity actually for us to act and grow in the commands of Jesus more freely. In Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, he instructs his followers to turn the other cheek when they are insulted. He instructs his followers to go an extra mile when a Roman forces them to carry their burden. See, each of these commands requires that we are able to self-regulate our emotions. It's an injustice to get slapped in the face and can make us incredibly angry. It would make me angry if some lazy person who didn't care squat about me forced me to carry their stuff for a mile, much less going that extra mile too. But being able to see through those emotions and see the other individual with empathy and compassion can enable us to live out these commands. A little additional way that we can build better emotional intelligence or more emotional intelligence is to take an assessment. Little assessments, I think, are super interesting in telling us about ourselves. If you think back to high school, you may have taken a personality assessment like the Myers-Briggs, or since then you may have taken something like the Enneagram personality test. These give us small little insights into ourselves at that particular moment in time. There's actually a really good 20-question assessment that takes less than 5 minutes to answer on the Psychology Today website that I recommend. Go and take that and see where you end up and what areas you might be able to increase your emotional intelligence, and see if it tells you anything that you didn't know about yourself. I've linked that assessment, that website, in the video description. Go and try it. Go and give it a shot. I want to give a couple of examples that we may come across in our everyday lives and how emotional intelligence can play into these situations. We may come into situations where emotional intelligence comes into play at work. We may have to deal with a customer who is irate. That customer as they come at us angry and yelling at us and just fussing at us for something that we may not even have a part in is going to trigger our anger, right? The injustice of them jumping on us is going to make us want to give them a piece of our mind right back. But instead of just raising our voices, or worse, bottling up that anger and gritting our teeth to get through it, if we recognize our anger and we're able to take a few breaths to let the emotions pass, and then we can maybe see and recognize what is making them mad. See, recognizing their trigger can actually help us to empathize with them. It can help us to think clearly and to possibly diffuse the situation and look like an absolute hero to our boss. So another scenario that we may encounter is personal sadness in us. We may come across a situation where one of our good, dear friends moves away. This moving away of a friend is a difficult sadness to bear. We really may not want to admit this as men, but we get sad when our good friends move away. For the introverts among us, it's hard to make friends at all. And for the extroverts, it can be difficult to make really true, deep, and lasting friendships. This difficulty of making friends as guys makes the sadness and the loss that we feel when we lose a good friend even deeper than we may want to admit. In order to actually deal with a sadness like this, though, and to approach it with a high degree of emotional intelligence, we want to be able to notice it and to put a name with it. That little piece of emotional awareness coming in again. By just naming the sadness, we can acknowledge that we are not invulnerable. We are not invincible. Even Batman and Superman got sad. I mean, come on. But by acknowledging sadness, then we can give ourselves permission and space to just be sad and to feel all of the other emotions that go along with sadness. This is an emotion that if we do not process, then we will not be able to move beyond it. See, all of these skills of emotional intelligence will give us tools in this manner. They'll give us tools to navigate this sadness. They'll give us the tools to navigate all of the other emotions that we feel as well. So as we leave this week, as we close out this series, I have one more question that I want you to ponder. And this question is going to take some of everything that we've talked about over the past 10 weeks. So I want you to think about and ponder on which emotion or what emotion do I dislike and try to get away from the most. Give that a thought as we go into this next week and as we close this out. I want to say thank you to everyone that has watched these videos and that has been a part of the past 10 weeks. I hope that each of these lessons have helped you in some way and that you may have learned something about yourself that you didn't know before. Each of these lessons was meant and intended to build wholeness in each and every one of us as men. We focused in our emotions and mental aspects of ourselves mostly for this series, but this part of ourselves is interconnected with our physical bodies and with our spiritual states as well. All of these areas are so interconnected and intertwining that it can even become sometimes a little overwhelming to dive into all of them at once. It's my hope that you will take something that you learned here and begin to research it a little deeper, to find different ways to practice it and apply it to your life, and to see how being aware of your emotions can lead you to a more whole and a healthier life. Thank you again, and as always, may God keep you and bless you.